43 years. That's how long I raised my son, Charles, only for him to repay me with an ultimatum that broke my heart in two. "If you don't apologize, you're not coming to the wedding," he said, right to my face, in the living room of the house where he was born, where I taught him to walk, bandaged every scrape, and cheered every milestone. 43 years, my God, 43 years, just to hear my own son blackmail me over a woman he's known for 2 years. I was folding the tablecloths I'd embroidered for his wedding when he dropped this bombshell. Those tablecloths took me 3 months to make, every stitch, every little flower sewn with a mother's love, wanting nothing but his happiness. My hands were still trembling, clutching the fabric, when his words hit me like a gunshot. A direct shot to the chest of a woman who'd given her entire life to him. "Mom, we need to talk," he started. I knew it wasn't good news from the way he looked. Too serious, avoiding my eyes. Charles was always an open book. He could never hide when he was nervous or had something heavy to say. I set the tablecloths on the dining table and sat on the couch. The same couch where I nursed him as a baby, read him countless bedtime stories, and comforted him after his first high school heartbreak. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, my heart already tightening. A mother knows when a storm's coming. You feel it in the air, in the way your child breathes, in the tension that fills the room. He stood there in front of me, fidgeting with his hands like he did as a kid when he'd gotten into trouble. "It's about the wedding, Mom. About you and Emily." There it was. The problem I'd been pretending didn't exist. Emily, his fiancée, the woman who swept into our lives 2.5 years ago and made it clear from day one that I was a burden in their relationship. Not that she ever said it outright. She was too clever for that. Emily had this fake smile, these sugary words laced with venom, a way of convincing my son I was the villain in their story. "What about me and your fiancé?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but bracing myself for the storm. Charles sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair, just like his father used to when he was nervous. My ex-husband, Tom, passed away 15 years ago, but I still saw some of his habits in our son. "Mom, you know what it is." He finally met my eyes. "You don't like Emily, and she knows it. Everyone knows it." I swallowed hard. It was true. I didn't like her. How could I like someone who waltzed into my family, trying to change everything, push me away from my only son, and take a place that wasn't hers? But I was never rude, never cruel, never made a scene. I just didn't fake a warmth I didn't feel. I didn't embrace someone who clearly saw me as the enemy. "Charles, I've always respected your fiancée," I said, my voice shakier than I wanted. "I've treated her well in my home. If she feels uncomfortable around me, that's not my problem." "That's not it, Mom." His voice rose, which was rare for my polite son. "It's the comments, the looks, the way you treat her like she's an outsider." Outsider. The word came out of his mouth like it had been planted there, and I knew exactly by whom. Emily had done it. She'd turned my son against me, made him see malice where there was only a mother's exhaustion from feeling replaced. "What comments, Charles? Give me one example of something cruel I've said about your fiancée." I crossed my arms, waiting. I knew he wouldn't have an answer, because I'd never bad-mouthed her in front of him. I might not have liked her, but I had manners. He went quiet for a few seconds, searching his memory for something to pin on me. "You always find an excuse to skip the plans she makes. When she invites you to dinner at her parents' place, you say you're tired. When she suggests something for the wedding, you give her that look. Since when can't I be tired? Since when do I have to say yes to every invitation? And about the wedding, Charles, tell me one suggestion of hers I criticized." My voice was steadier now. "Better yet, tell me one decision she made about this wedding where she asked for my opinion first." I hit the mark. He looked away because he knew it was true. Emily decided everything herself, or with her mother, like I didn't exist, like I wasn't the groom's mom, like my opinion was worthless. She picked the venue, the decorations, the menu, even the flowers, without consulting me. When I gently offered a suggestion, she'd smile and say, "It's all set. No need to change anything. Mom, she just wants you to like her. It hurts her when she feels you don't approve." Charles softened his tone, trying to sound caring, but I knew my son. Those weren't his words. Charles, look me in the eyes and tell me, who's asking me to apologize? You or her? Silence. A silence that screamed the answer I already knew. Emily had won. She'd convinced my son I was the problem, that I was ruining their happiness, that I had to grovel to earn a place at my own son's wedding. She didn't ask for anything, Mom, but I see how she feels when you... He trailed off, knowing he was lying. Emily had asked. She'd given the ultimatum. Either I apologized for being a difficult mother-in-law, or I wasn't welcome at the wedding. When I what, Charles? When I breathe, when I exist. The hurt was rising in my throat like bile. This woman came into my home, my family, and wants me to apologize for existing. Don't exaggerate, Mom. Exaggerate? I stood up from the couch, my legs shaking with anger and disappointment. I raised you alone since I was 28, Charles. Your father died when you were 28, but you were never an orphan because I was here. I worked double shifts to pay for your school. I stayed up nights when you had a fever. I celebrated every good grade, every achievement, every girlfriend you brought home. He lowered his head, and I saw the insecure boy he still was beneath the 43-year-old man. And now you come into my house and tell me I have to apologize to a woman who barely knows our family just to attend your wedding? My voice cracked, tears blurring my vision. Apologize for what, Charles? For dedicating my life to you? For giving up so much to see you grow up right? For staying single after your dad died at 45 because I chose to focus on you? Mom, stop. He stepped toward me, but I backed away. No, let me finish. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. Do you know how many good men I turned away because I thought they'd get in your way? How many trips I skipped? How many dreams I put on hold? How many nights I stayed up worrying about your future? He was crying now too. And for a moment, I thought I'd gotten through to him, made him see the injustice. But then he spoke, and I knew I'd lost my son forever. Mom, I know everything you've done for me, but that doesn't give you the right to treat the woman I love badly. I never treated your fiancé badly, Charles. You do, in your way, with your silence, your coldness. Emily cries after she leaves here, you know? She cries because she feels rejected by you. Emily cries. Of course she does. Crocodile tears to convince my son I'm a monster. Tears to be comforted, to hear him promise he'll put me in my place, force me to accept her no matter what. And what do you want me to do, Charles? Fake a love I don't feel? Be a hypocrite? I want you to apologize to her. I want you to admit you haven't been a good mother-in-law and promise to try harder. There it was. The ultimatum. The final humiliation. Apologize for not being fake, for not pretending to adore someone who didn't respect me, for not bowing to the whims of a woman who wanted me groveling. And if I don't? Charles looked me in the eyes, and in that moment, I saw I'd lost him for good. The coldness in his gaze, the resolve, the certainty he was doing the right thing. If you don't apologize, you're out of the wedding, Mom. Out of the wedding. Out of the most important day of my son's life. Out of the celebration I'd helped plan, for which I'd embroidered tablecloths, saved money for months to buy a nice dress. Out of the party where I should have been by his side, proud, blessing his union. You're giving me an ultimatum, Charles. I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing. The right thing. Apologizing for existing was the right thing. Humiliating myself was the right thing. Accepting being treated like trash in my own family was the right thing. I looked at the tablecloths on the table. 3 months of work. 3 months dreaming of my son's wedding, picturing how beautiful it would be, how happy I'd be seeing him fulfilled. 3 months believing that, despite our differences, we were still a family. All right, Charles. He let out a relieved breath, thinking I'd cave, that I'd humiliate myself, that I'd give Emily the apology she wanted. I'll do the right thing. I picked up the tablecloths, one by one, and looked at my son. The man I no longer recognized, who'd chosen a manipulative woman over the mother who'd given her life for him. The right thing is to cancel everything. Before he could react, before he could process what was happening, I started tearing the tablecloths. One by one, ripping apart every little flower I'd sewn with love, every stitch I'd made thinking of his happiness. The sound of the fabric tearing filled the room like a battle cry. Charles stood there, stunned, watching me destroy 3 months of work, 3 months of love woven into every stitch. First tablecloth, torn. Second tablecloth, torn. The third, I held a little longer, staring at the flower in the center I'd made, thinking of the grandchildren I might never meet. "Mom, what are you doing?" His voice came out thin, almost a whisper of panic, but I didn't stop. I kept tearing, feeling a strange liberation with every piece of fabric that fell apart in my hands. "Stop it! Now you care?" I threw the pieces on the floor and looked at him. "When I was making them, stitching every detail for your happiness, you didn't care. When your fiancé made all the decisions without asking me, you didn't care. When she humiliated me in front of her family last Sunday, you didn't care either." He tried to pick up the pieces from the floor, as if he could glue them back together, undo what I'd done. "You're crazy. Those tablecloths were beautiful. You worked so hard." I did work hard, just like I worked my whole life for you. I went to the living room cabinet and pulled out the folder where I kept all the wedding papers. Invitations, budgets, lists, notes. Everything organized with a mother's care, wanting everything to be perfect. "Know what else I'm canceling, Charles?" He looked at me, eyes wide, finally realizing I wasn't bluffing. "Mom, stop this. Let's talk it out." "Talk?" I laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Did you come here to talk? Or to give me an ultimatum like I'm a dog that disobeyed its owner?" I opened the folder and flipped through the papers. "Look at this, Charles. Know how much I've already spent on this wedding?" He stayed silent because he'd never cared about the numbers, never asked if I could afford it, if it was straining my budget. To him, I was just the mom who always figured it out, who always made it work. $2,700, Charles. $2,700 I saved over 2 years, working late nights as a seamstress, cleaning houses on weekends, selling cupcakes at the school where I teach. I showed him the receipts. $2,700 to help pay for the wedding of an ungrateful son who's now kicking me out of it. "I'm not kicking you out. I'm just asking you to apologize." "It's the same thing," I shouted, and he flinched because I never shouted. I was always the calm, composed, polite mom. "You're humiliating me, forcing me to grovel for a woman who showed up yesterday in our family." I grabbed my phone and started dialing. First call, the caterer. Charles tried to take the phone from my hand, but I dodged him. "Hello? Who do I speak to about canceling an event?" I said into the phone, staring straight into my son's eyes. He was pale, finally realizing I wasn't playing around. "Mom, hang up that phone." He came toward me, but I walked through the house, continuing the call. "It's for Charles Edwards' wedding, December 22nd. Yes, I want to cancel." I spoke calmly while Charles followed me like a desperate puppy. "How much is the penalty?" "All right, deduct it from what's already paid." I hung up and dialed the next number. The band. Charles was nearly crying now, begging me to stop. But I felt a strength I hadn't felt in years. The strength of someone who decided not to be anyone's doormat anymore. "Hello, it's about the performance on December 22nd. Yes, I want to cancel." The coordinator on the other end tried to talk me out of it, mentioning penalties and commitments. "Deduct it from the deposit I paid. Thank you." Third call, the photographer. Charles was sitting on the kitchen floor now, head in his hands, rocking back and forth like a child throwing a tantrum. "Mom, stop, for God's sake. We can figure this out another way." "What other way, Charles?" I said, while waiting for the photographer to pick up. "You gave me 2 options, grovel or be excluded. I chose the third option." The photographer answered, and I explained I needed to cancel. Another penalty, more money lost, but I didn't care anymore. Fourth call, the florist. Fifth call, the church. With every cancellation, Charles grew more desperate, more incredulous, like he'd just woken up from a dream and realized he'd lost everything. "You can't do this to me." He stood up and faced me. "This is my wedding. You have no right." "No right?" I stopped dialing and looked at him with a calm that surprised me. "You're right, Charles. I have no right. No right to an opinion on the wedding I'm helping pay for. No right to be respected as a mother. No right to be treated with dignity by my daughter-in-law. You're absolutely right. I have no right." That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. I kept dialing. And you know what? You're right. I have no say in your wedding. So I'm canceling my part. You and your precious fiancé can throw whatever party you want with your own money. 6th call, the courthouse for the civil ceremony. 7th call, the party rental company. With every cancellation, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders like I was breaking free from invisible chains I'd carried for years. Charles tried to talk between calls, begging me to stop, promising we'd work it out, that he'd talk to Emily. But I knew my son. The second he left my house, he'd run to his fiancée, tell her how his crazy mother lost it and canceled everything. Emily would comfort him, say I'd always been unhinged, that he was better off without me. Done. I hung up the last call and put the phone in my purse. Now you can have your wedding exactly how your fiancé wants it, without the inconvenient mother-in-law getting in the way. He looked at me like I was a stranger, like he couldn't fathom the woman standing in front of him. And he was right, because for 43 years, I'd been the submissive mom, the one who always gave in, who fixed everything without making a fuss. Mom, you're destroying my happiness out of pride. Pride. The word came out like a slap. Charles, pride is what you should have in me. Pride in a mother who fought to raise you alone. Pride in a mother who never let you go without. Pride in a mother who gave up her own life to see you happy. I am proud of you. Are you? Then why are you asking me to humiliate myself? Why are you forcing me to apologize for not liking someone who disrespects me? He had no answer because, for the first time, he saw the contradiction in his own words. How can you be proud of someone and still want them to grovel? Emily doesn't disrespect you, Mom. She just wants to feel accepted. Accepted? I sat at the kitchen table, facing him. Charles, answer me honestly. Since you two started dating, how many times has your fiancée tried to get to know me? How many times has she asked about my life, my interests? He fidgeted with his hands, silent. How many times has she complimented something I've done? Shown genuine interest in having a good relationship with me? Dead silence. Now tell me, how many times have I criticized her to your face? Spoken badly of her? Been disrespectful? You don't badmouth her, but what, Charles? But I exist? But I breathe the same air as her? But I take up space she wishes wasn't there? He started crying again, and my heart ached. No matter how hurt I was, he was still my son, still the boy I'd rocked to sleep 1,000 times. Mom, I don't want to choose between you two. You're not choosing, Charles. You already chose. I stood and went to the sink, needing something to do with my hands to keep from crying. From the first day she complained about me, you chose to believe her over the mother who raised you. I started washing dishes in the sink, just to keep busy, to avoid looking at him and caving like I always did. Remember when you were 8, and that kid at school said you were adopted because you didn't have a dad? I said, scrubbing a plate. I went to the school, talked to the principal, the kid's mom, fixed it so you wouldn't hurt anymore. I remember. Remember when you were in college, dating that girl, Patricia, who tried to get you to drop out to support her? I kept washing, the hot water burning my hands. I talked to you, showed you she was using you, helped you see the truth. I remember that too. And you listened to me then. Trusted my judgment, believed I only wanted what was best for you. I turned off the faucet and faced him. Why is it different now, Charles? Why, when I'm trying to protect you again, do you believe someone who just showed up? He looked up, eyes red from crying. Because now I'm in love, Mom. Emily is the woman of my life, the woman of your life. I repeated his words, trying to understand. And me? What am I in your life? You're my mom. Exactly. I'm your mom. The person who's loved you unconditionally since before you were born. The one who'll never abandon you, betray you, or use you. I dried my hands on a dish towel and stepped closer. And that person, your son, you're throwing away for a passion. Charles stared at me, and for a moment, I thought I'd gotten through. But then he spoke, and I knew I'd lost the battle. Mom, I love you, but I love Emily too. And if you can't accept that, he said, as if the problem was my inability to accept, not her disrespect toward me. Then it's settled. I grabbed my purse and car keys. You love her more than you respect me. That's fine, Charles. It's your choice. Where are you going? To my sister Susan's place. I'll stay there a few days until you and your fiancé figure out how to have this wedding you want so badly. I paused at the door and looked at him one last time. Oh, and Charles? When you're crunching the numbers to redo everything I canceled today, remember I saved for 2 years to help you. 2 years working like a dog to see my son happy. I walked out, shutting the door on 43 years of unconditional devotion. In the car, I finally broke down. I cried for the ingratitude, the injustice, the loneliness I knew lay ahead. But through the tears, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Relief at saying no. Relief at not humiliating myself. Relief at choosing my dignity over a false peace. 3 days at Susan's were enough for my phone to start ringing nonstop. First, it was Charles, frantic, begging me to come home, saying we'd work it out. Then Emily herself called, sobbing, claiming she never meant for things to get this bad, that she respected me, that she just wanted to be part of the family. Diane, can you come back? I promise we'll talk and fix everything, she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness I knew too well. I'll call all the vendors, undo the cancellations, we'll start over. Emily, are you sure you want to talk to me? Because I have a lot to say. I was sitting on Susan's porch, watching the rain fall on the Austin street. Yes, Diane, you're so important to Charles, and I want you to like me. Lies. She wanted me back because she was desperate without the $2,700 I was covering, without the planning I'd done, without the things I'd arranged. Her dream wedding had turned into a nightmare of bills and penalties. All right, I'll be home this afternoon. But you come alone to talk. No Charles. She agreed instantly, too eager to realize I had an ace up my sleeve she hadn't seen coming. I got home around 5. Charles was there, pacing the living room, nervous like I'd never seen. When he saw me walk in, he ran to hug me like I'd come back from the dead. Mom, thank God you're back. Emily's on her way, you'll talk, you'll fix everything. He was talking fast, tripping over his words. I already called some vendors. Some cancellations can still be reversed. Charles, sit, I said calmly, setting my purse on the couch. Before your fiancé gets here, I need to tell you something. He sat on the edge of the armchair, tense, waiting. I pulled out a folder I'd brought from Susan's, one he'd never seen. Know why your fiancé is so eager to talk to me today? I opened the folder and showed him some papers. Because she found out that without my financial help, you can't afford the wedding she planned. Charles looked at the papers, confused. What are these, Mom? They're receipts for every transfer I made to your account over the last 6 months. I showed him each one. $900 in June for the venue deposit, $500 in July for the dress and suit, $350 in August for the honeymoon, $500 in September for decorations and flowers, $300 last month for the band and photographer. He went pale, finally grasping the extent of my contribution. Mom, I didn't know it was that much. Of course you didn't. Because you never asked. You just took the money and spent it. I put the papers back in the folder. Know how much of this wedding's budget I was covering, Charles? He shook his head, dreading the answer. 65%. Almost 70% of everything. I let that sink in. Your fiancé planned a $10,000 wedding counting on my money without ever thanking me, without ever acknowledging my help. But she didn't know. Didn't know? I laughed, but it wasn't funny. Charles, who do you think paid the deposit for that fancy caterer she picked? Who do you think covered that $2,000 dress? She knew. She knew and pretended she didn't, so she wouldn't have to thank me. The doorbell rang. Emily had arrived for the talk that would change everything. Charles stood to answer, but I was faster. I'll get it. It's my house after all. Emily stood at the door with a bouquet of flowers and that rehearsed smile she used when she wanted something. Light blue dress, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. A full performance. Diane, so good to see you. She tried to hug me, but I just took the flowers and stepped aside to let her in. Emily, Charles, can you give us a minute? Mom, I think I should stay. Charles, your fiancé said she wanted to talk to me. so let us talk." My tone left no room for argument, and he knew it. He sighed and went out to the backyard, leaving us alone in the living room. Emily sat on the couch, smoothing her dress, striking that practiced pose of someone performing. "Diane, I want to apologize if you felt disrespected by me. That was never my intention." "Sit up straight, Emily. Stop acting," I said sharply, and she flinched at my tone. "We're going to have a real conversation now." She adjusted her posture, unsure how to react. "I'm not acting, Diane." "Yes, you are. Just like you've been acting for 2.5 years since you came into our family." I sat in the armchair across from her. "But today's different. Today, you're going to listen." Emily swallowed hard, realizing she wasn't in control like she thought. "First, you're here apologizing because you found out you can't pay for the wedding you planned without my money, not because you're sorry for disrespecting me." I set the folder on my lap. "Second, you always knew I was covering most of the costs and pretended you didn't to avoid thanking me or giving me any say." "Diane, Be quiet. I'm not done." My voice was harsher than I meant, and she shrank back on the couch. "Third, you manipulated my son into thinking I was the problem in your relationship when you never wanted an involved mother-in-law in the first place." Tears started streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of anger from being called out. "Fourth, you gave my son an ultimatum to force me to apologize, thinking I'd grovel to keep him in my life." I pulled a paper from the folder. "But you didn't count on one thing." "What's that?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "That I'm not just any woman. I'm Diane Wilson, a teacher for 40 years, a single mom who raised a son on her own, built a life with dignity, and I don't kneel for anyone." I showed her the paper. "Especially not for a girl who got my son to sign a prenup without telling me." Emily went white as a sheet. She hadn't expected me to know. "That's right, sweetheart. I know you signed a prenup in September, putting all assets in partial community property, including the house I gave Charles as a graduation gift." I folded the paper and put it back. "The house that's still in my name because he never transferred the title." "Diane, I can explain." "You can't explain anything. Now you listen to me." I stood and walked to the window, glancing at Charles pacing nervously in the backyard. "You came into our family thinking you could run everything, push me out of my son's life, and take all the benefits without any obligation to me." She was crying harder now, but I felt no pity. "You planned an expensive wedding counting on my money. You manipulated my son into giving me an ultimatum. You signed papers listing me as a guarantor without my knowledge." I turned to her, my gaze ice cold. "You messed with the wrong woman, girl." "What do you want?" she asked between sobs. "What do I want?" I sat back down. "I want you to understand one simple thing. I don't need your wedding. You need me." I pulled another paper from the folder. "This is a document my lawyer drafted, a power of attorney revoking all guarantees I gave for loans related to you two." I showed it to her. "By signing this, I remove myself as guarantor for the apartment you bought and all the financing you took out." Emily read the paper and went even paler. "You can't do this. We'll lose everything." "I can, and I will." I put the paper away. "Unless you agree to my conditions." "What conditions?" "First, you apologize to me. Not because I'm forcing you, but because you recognize you disrespected me." I held up one finger. "Second, you redo the wedding budget with the money you have, without counting on me." "But Diane." "Third, if I choose to help financially, it'll be because I want to, not because you expect it." I raised another finger. "Fourth, you treat me with the respect a mother-in-law deserves. No faking, no pretense." Emily shook her head, frantic. "We can't afford the wedding on our own. We already spent everything on deposits." "That's not my problem. You planned it without asking me, so figure it out without me." I stood and walked to the door. "Charles, come here." My son rushed in, seeing Emily crying on the couch and me standing with a no-nonsense look. "What happened?" "Your fiancé just learned you need me more than I need you." I handed him the power of attorney. "Read this and tell me if you still think you can give me ultimatums." Charles read the paper and sank into the armchair. "Mom, you can't do this to us." "I can, and I will. Unless you both realize I'm not your maid in this family. I grabbed my purse and keys. You have until tomorrow to decide. Either you respect me as I deserve, or you're on your own. Mom, stay. Let's fix this now. Charles stood, but I was already at the door. There's nothing left to fix, Charles. You gave me an ultimatum, now I'm giving you one. I looked at Emily, curled up on the couch like a scared child. Emily, it's your choice. Keep trying to push me out of my son's life and lose everything you've gained, or learn to respect me and have a real family. I walked out again, but this time I wasn't crying. I felt a strength, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. I'd discovered the power was mine all along. I just hadn't known how to use it. The next morning at 8, Charles showed up at Susan's, alone. His eyes red from a sleepless night, with a humility I hadn't seen in him since he was a kid. Mom, we need to talk. Now you want to talk? After realizing you can't do it without me? He lowered his head. Emily cried all night. She said she never imagined you knew everything, that she never wanted it to come to this. And you, Charles? What did you realize? He looked me in the eyes, and I finally saw my son again. Not the manipulated man, but the boy I'd raised with so much love. I realized I was an idiot. I realized I hurt the most important person in my life over wounded pride. He started crying. I realized my mom is stronger and wiser than I ever knew. And now, what do you want? We want your blessing, Mom. We want to make peace. We want you back in our family. He took my hand. Emily wants to apologize for real. She wants to start over with you. I looked at my son, that 43-year-old man crying like a repentant child, and my heart softened. But it wouldn't be that easy. Charles, I accept your apologies, but things will be different from now on. How so? I'll help with the wedding, but on my terms. I'll give my opinions, make decisions, be involved. I held his hand tightly. And if your wife doesn't like it, she'll have to deal with it, because I'm your mother and no one's taking that place from me ever again. Charles smiled through his tears. She agreed to everything, Mom. She just wants you back. 3 months later, I was in the front row of the church, wearing the navy blue dress I'd picked out, watching my son marry a woman who'd learned to respect me. Emily didn't become my best friend, but she learned to treat me with courtesy and consideration. And I learned that sometimes, to be loved and respected, you have to be willing to lose everything. The wedding was beautiful. A mix of my suggestions, their choices, and a lot of mutual respect. When Charles asked me to dance, he whispered in my ear, "Thank you for teaching me that real love also means knowing when to say no." Today, 2 years later, I have a beautiful granddaughter who calls me Grandma Diane, and a daughter-in-law who calls me every week to check in. Not out of obligation, but because she finally understood that family is built on respect, not submission. And I learned the most important lesson of my life. Teaching those we love to value themselves sometimes means having the courage to say no at the right time.